Hi, my name is Jack Rackham, and today I'm going to show you a family tree consisting of several important Welsh monarchs, kings and princes who ruled in Wales back when Wales was made up of several small, independent kingdoms. Nowadays, of course, Wales is part of the United Kingdom, and the title Prince of Wales is held by Charles, the heir apparent of Queen Elizabeth. However, before the English took the title in 1301, it was in fact used by several Welsh monarchs. So, who was the original Prince of Wales? Well, that's what we're going to find out. This video is sponsored by MyHeritage. More on them at the end of the video. During the early medieval period, Wales was divided into several small kingdoms. For much of this time, the largest and most powerful of these kingdoms was Gwynedd in the north. You may recognize this name as it is the origin of the name Gwynedd, as in Gwyneth Paltrow. Anyhow, the kingdom of Gwynedd was founded in the 5th century by a man named Cynydda. According to tradition, Cynydda was the grandson of a high-ranking Roman official who served during the final days of Rome's governance in the area just north of Hadrian's Wall. Now, whether this individual was actually a Roman or a local chieftain who was given a Roman rank is unknown, but what we do know is that at some point after the Romans left, his grandson Cynydda landed in North Wales with a group of warriors to help defend the area against the Irish. And it seems they decided to stay because soon thereafter, the area transformed into the kingdom of Gwynedd, with Cynydda as its first king. There are very few historical records for what happened during the next several hundred years, which is why the term the Dark Ages is so often used. However, one of Cynydda's early descendants was supposedly Saint David, now considered to be the patron saint of all Wales. The festival of St. David, which always falls on March the 1st, is celebrated as the national holiday for the Welsh people. The next king I'd like to point out is Cadwallon, who reigned from 625 to 634. He was mentioned several times during our video on the Anglo-Saxon monarchs. As a child, Cadwallon grew up with Edwin, the future king of Deira and Bernicia, who had ended up in Wales as an exile. But later in life, when they both ended up as kings, Cadwallon and Edwin became enemies, with Cadwallon eventually allying with the pagan king Penda of Mercia and killing Edwin in battle. But Edwin got his posthumous revenge when his nephew Oswald managed to kill Cadwallon in battle just 2 years later. It is perhaps Cadwallon's son Cadwaladr who perhaps had the greater impact on Welsh history, though, for the simple fact that it was his emblem, that of a red dragon, that ended up becoming the national symbol of Wales, appearing on the Welsh flag on top of green and white stripes. Eventually, the male line descendants of Cynydda died out, and the throne ended up in the hands of Mervyn Vrych, whose mother was the daughter of a previous king. He is notable for being the father of Rhodri the Great, one of the most famous kings in all of Welsh history. Rhodri was a contemporary of two other great British kings, Alfred the Great in England and Kenneth MacAlpin in Scotland. Like Alfred and Kenneth, Rhodri ruled during a time when the many small kingdoms on the island of Great Britain were starting to merge together to form larger kingdoms. So, for example, it was during the reign of Alfred the Great that the various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms finally merged into what would eventually be called England. And it was during the reign of Kenneth MacAlpin that the kingdom of the Picts merged with the kingdom of Dalriada into what would eventually be called Scotland. Initially, it seemed that Wales might follow a similar trajectory. Through his mother, Rhodri had a claim to the nearby kingdom of Powys, and through his wife, he had a claim to the kingdom of Saesalog as well. Thus, Rhodri ended up controlling more of Wales than any other Welsh king up to that point. In fact, later chroniclers would refer to him as being the King of Wales, although no such entity known as the Kingdom of Wales ever really existed. Unlike in England and Scotland, the road to unification was short-lived. After Rhodri's death, his lands were divided among his sons, and over the next few centuries there was lots of internal fighting with the various thrones passing back and forth between many different families. However, two main dynasties dominated. These were the House of Aberfrau in the north and the House of Dinevor in the south. Initially, Dinevor was the stronger house, thanks to a grandson of Rhodri known as Howel Dda, or in English, Howel the Good. He merged Seisalog with Dyfed to form the kingdom of Deheubarth, which basically meant the kingdom of the south. He also came to rule Gwynedd, and thus ended up ruling a territory even larger than that of his grandfather. Basically, the only area that he did not control was that of Morganwig, which is where the current Welsh capital of Cardiff is located. Much of Howell's success came down to the fact that he was on very friendly terms with Athelstan, the first king of a truly united England. Basically, Howell recognized Athelstan as being the higher-ranking king and did not try to compete with him. It was also during the reign of Howel Dda that traditional Welsh laws were codified for the first time, and thus the term the Law of Howell was used long after Howell's death. But following Howell, Wales once again fractured into many pieces, and it wasn't until a century later that a chance for unification rose again. This time it was under a king named Gruffydd ap Llywelyn. You may have noticed that many Welsh names on this chart include the word ap. Well, ap simply means son of, so Gruffydd was the son of a man named Llywelyn. Llywelyn was not a member of the House of Dinevor, but his mother was. Through a series of conquests, Gruffydd was able to gain control of every kingdom in Wales, this time even Morganwig. Thus, Gruffydd ap Llywelyn became the first and only person to ever be king of all Wales. Yet again, things fell apart after his death. This was largely due to the arrival of a new player on the scene, the Normans. 3 years after the death of Gruffydd ap Llywelyn, William the Conqueror and his Norman armies arrived. Although they primarily focused their invasion on England, many areas in Wales fell to their control as well, not to mention Ireland. Earlier on this channel, we did a video about the Irish Fitzgerald family. Appearing in that video was a famous Welsh princess named Nest, the daughter of the king of Deheubarth, and thus a member of the House of Dinevor. Initially, she was the mistress of William the Conqueror's son Henry, who would go on to become Henry I. However, she later married a Norman leader named Gerald, and thus it is from her that the Fitzgeralds, i.e. sons of Gerald, descend. Around this time, the House of Aberfrau, which I mentioned earlier as being the other major house that descended from Rhodri the Great, started to become more powerful, thanks to the successes of a king of Gwynedd named Gruffydd ap Cynan. But it was under Gruffydd's son Owain, known as Owain the Great, that Wales once again became a force to be reckoned with. This was partly due to the fact that during much of Owain's early reign, England was embroiled in a civil war known as the Anarchy between King Stephen and his cousin Matilda. Thus, by the time that the anarchy was over and Henry II was made king, Wales was strong enough to repel the English invasion that ensued. One of Owain's allies during the conflict was Lord Rhys, the nephew of Princess Nest and ruler of Deheubarth in the south. It was somewhere during the rule of these two men that the term Prince of Wales was used for the first time to refer to the dominant ruler in Wales. Whether Owain was the first Prince of Wales, or whether it was Lord Rhys, or whether it was someone later, is actually up for debate. This is because medieval rulers often used a variety of different titles when signing documents, and how exactly those titles are translated can vary. For example, among the various titles used by Owain the Great were Prince over the British Nation, King of Wales, King of the Welsh, and Prince of the Welsh. It should be noted once again that there was never actually a Kingdom of Wales. Technically, Owain was merely the King of Gwynedd, so although he may have used the term King of Wales, he didn't even rule over all of Wales. As mentioned earlier, the one and only Welsh king to actually achieve that feat was Gruffydd ap Llywelyn. After the death of Owain the Great, Gwynedd was eventually divided among his sons. However, it eventually came to be ruled by one of his grandsons, known as Llywelyn the Great. Llywelyn was the last major Welsh king, and the last to hold sway over the majority of Welsh territory. Again, whether or not he actually used the title Prince of Wales during his lifetime is disputed, although he did use the title Prince of North Wales. Despite this, it is the coat of arms of Llywelyn the Great that is today associated with the title Prince of Wales. For example, you can see it quite clearly at the center of the coat of arms of Prince Charles. Llywelyn married Joan, an illegitimate daughter of King John of England, and with her produced his heir, Dafydd ap Llywelyn. Dafydd definitely did use the title Prince of Wales, so if we're looking for the first definitive person to use the title, Dafydd would be that person. And after his death, the title passed to his nephew, Llywelyn ap Gruffudd, better known as Llywelyn the Last. He's called that because, although he was only the second official Prince of Wales, at least from Wales, he was also the last. During his tenure, King Edward I of England invaded Wales and eventually conquered it once and for all. Llywelyn died during that conflict, and for a brief period, his brother Dafydd took over as prince, but was quickly captured and killed. In fact, Dafydd is the first major person in recorded history to receive the punishment of being hanged, drawn, and quartered. So, from this point onwards, Wales was integrated into England, first as a separate principality, and then eventually as part of England proper. And it was at this point that the title Prince of Wales was given as a ceremonial title to the son of Edward I, the man who eventually became Edward II. Thus began the custom of bestowing the title Prince of Wales on the heir apparent to the English throne, which later became the British throne. However, please note that the title is only ever given to a male heir. So, for example, Queen Elizabeth was not called the Princess of Wales prior to becoming queen. Following the takeover of Wales by England, there were a few attempts to restore Welsh independence. The first of these took place in 1294, when a descendant of Owain the Great named Madog ap Llywelyn led an unsuccessful revolt. Then there was Owain Lawgoch, a grandnephew of Llywelyn the Last. He led an attack from France, but failed. Finally, there was Owain Glyndwr, a distant descendant of Lord Rhys. His revolt was by far the most successful of the three, making several gains and lasting 15 years. It took place during the 100 Years' War, and thus Glyndwr was initially able to get assistance from France. But in the end, the uprising failed, and Wales remains a part of England, now Great Britain, to this day. But there is one last twist to the story. Back when Llywelyn the Great was king, there was a man named Ednyfed who married a woman named Gwenllian from the House of Dynevor and became the Seneschal of Gwynedd. A seneschal was a sort of high steward who helped take care of various royal duties on behalf of the king. Gwenllian and Ednyfed's son Gorwnwi went on to serve as seneschal as well, this time for Llywelyn the Last. He, in turn, had a son named Tudur Hen. Now, if the name Tudur sounds familiar to you, that's because the House of Tudor, named after this very guy, would go on to play a major role in British history. By this point, the family now served England, and Tudor's great-great-grandson Owen Tudor was a prominent enough noble that he ended up marrying Catherine of Valois, the widow of Henry V and former queen consort of England. Their son Edmund was thus the half-brother of King Henry VI. Edmund Tudor married Margaret Beaufort, the daughter of John Beaufort, who was a first cousin of Henry V. Margaret's Aunt Joan had previously served as Queen Consort of Scotland as the wife of James I. In other words, by this point, the Tudors were a very well-connected family. They were also major players in the Wars of the Roses, fighting on the Lancastrian side against the Yorkists. In fact, they helped end the Wars of the Roses when Henry, the son of Edmund Tudor and Margaret Beaufort, pledged to marry Elizabeth of York, daughter of King Edward IV, in an effort to once and for all unite the two sides. In 1485, Henry attacked and defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, claiming the throne of England by right of conquest. He then went on to marry Elizabeth and establish a new royal house, the House of Tudor. Okay, so that was a look at some of the most important monarchs in Welsh history, as well as their connection to the Tudor dynasty in England. If you'd like to learn more about the Tudors, you should check out last week's video on who would be King of England today if Henry VIII's will had been followed.
Thanks, Jack. You know, one of the things we get asked a lot on this channel is, how can I research and build my own family tree? Well, today's sponsor is MyHeritage, and they have created an easy-to-use website that will help you do exactly that. You can sign up for a 14-day free trial right now using the link in the description or pinned comment. And if you decide to keep it, you get 50% off. Once you sign up, you'll be asked to provide your name, country, and birth year. This will start off your tree with, well, you. From there, you can easily add your parents and grandparents. If you don't know this information, MyHeritage also offers a DNA test at one of the most affordable prices on the market. Taking a DNA test will help you discover some of your cousins, and from there you can probably find out who some of your ancestors were as well. If you do know the names of your parents and grandparents, this means that you have a magic 7, and this is all the information you will need to start, because from there, MyHeritage does the rest. See those links labeled Discovery? Just click on one of those and MyHeritage will use its connections to public databases such as Genie.com and Billion Graves to suggest possible ancestors. You can then check the information on these matches, and if they seem correct, you can watch your tree grow really large really fast. Once you've built your tree, MyHeritage offers you several different ways to see it as a completed chart. Obviously, I'm a guy who loves charts, so I find this part of the website really exciting. You can choose a bow tie chart, a sun chart, a fan chart, etc., and then save it as a PDF or even order it as a poster. MyHeritage also lets you search over 15 billion historical records. So if you know the name of one of your ancestors and you want to learn more about them in particular, you can use the search function to access things like birth certificates, census records, and newspaper articles. Finally, MyHeritage has some amazing tools for colorizing, enhancing, and even animating old photos. The animation function is particularly fun. Many of us have some old black and white photos of ancestors whom we've never met or even seen video footage of. MyHeritage can literally bring those old photos to life. Well, not literally, but close. It even animated everybody's favorite royal ancestor, Charlemagne. If you'd like to start researching your tree, you can do so now. Just click the link in the description or pinned comment for a 14-day free trial. Again, after that, if you decide to keep it, you will get 50% off. Thanks for watching.